If you're watching this video, you've already watched part 1, where we reviewed the info and income tabs of the self-employed Excel summary. The third step in completing the summary is to review the operating costs PDF. This is a 2-page document which has an extensive list of expenses you can claim. I have the PDF open here, and you can see that if we go to the top, the PDF separated by operating expenses, home office costs, and automobile expenses on the second page. So before you start inputting any expenses in the summary, be sure to review this, so you know what expenses may be applicable for your business, and you can also take the time to compile and collect as necessary. As always, if you have any questions about it and what may apply to you, email me any questions you may have. Let's just go back to the slideshow for a moment. Once you know what expenses and costs to consider, you can start inputting the expenses. The expenses are separated into 3 tabs: operating, home, and auto. Now, each tab works exactly the same. It's simply customized according to these categories. So once you do one tab, you can do them all. To fill out these tabs, you would choose one of the 2 methods, the totals method or the details method. We'll go through both examples here so you clearly know which method works for you. You'll remember that in part 1 we discussed how HST would be calculated for you, and you would enter only the total amounts. So the same applies here. Whatever method you use, make sure to enter total cash amounts, in this case the expense and the HST paid. So let's go to the Excel summary and walk through this. I have it open here. I'm just going to pop it up. So the third tab and the first one of the expenses is the operating expenses tab right here. Okay. As you can see, there's not much here. Let's assume first that you know the totals for all your expenses and costs for the tax year. So in that case, it is best to use the totals method. So what we'll do here is there's 2 shaded cells and there's instructions. We'll select totals, okay? And we'll also say in this example, HST is applicable, okay? You'll see that a few rows pop up and appear. Again, a reminder that this form is designed to be responsive, so it's clear and there's no confusion, okay? So what you would do is you would go to the first shaded cell for the expense item row. So these are the expense items, and this whole row is where you would enter the item. So from the drop-down menu, select what expense applies, and then you would follow along. So let's say advertising and promotion, okay? For each expense item, you then have the option of inputting expenses that have HST and others that don't. So some expenses that don't have HST, for example, would be insurance, bank charges. Rent could be another if you're using home office space. So just be sure to distinguish accordingly. So let's just go through this. Let's go through an example. Let's assume that you have $1,130 in advertising and promotion, and there is HST on it. So that's this row right here. So you just put 1130. That's the total for the entire year, and there you go. It calculates the HST as well. And as you can see, total expenses are calculated, or rather the total cash, and the HST is calculated for you. Okay. And if you wanted to go through one more example real quick, let's say, for example, you have dues and memberships. Maybe that's $26.60, and it just once again does all that for you. Just to show the example of non-HST, if you had bank charges, maybe you had 135 for the year, you put it here and you see there's no HST. You could just put zeros here if you want, or you could leave it the way it is. It doesn't matter. Okay. All right. So let's take another example. Let's assume that instead You have all your receipts, your bank statements, other listings, so on and so forth, but you don't have it totaled anywhere for any of your expenses and costs. So in this case, the details method is what may be best for you. Okay, so let's go to the next tab actually for that. Let's go to home office expenses. So that's the second tab here, and you can see it's sort of blank again. Okay, so we're going to select here instead of totals, pardon me, we're going to select details, and once again we'll say HST is applicable. Okay, you'll notice two differences. Okay, the first difference is that you'll notice now there's two sections, one for expenses with the HST, one without or no HST. And the second thing you'll notice is that on the left side of here, like off the sheet, off the worksheet that is, you'll see two plus signs. Okay, that's to expand rows, and I'm going to show you what this is when we walk through the example. Okay, so let's take the first example. Let's say you do have a home office, so this tab is applicable. Let's say you're going to collect heat, or you're going to calculate heat costs. So heat costs more likely than not do have HST on them. Okay, so from the drop down menu, select heat. Then what you do is, you'll see that there's nowhere sort of input. You would expand the rows here, this first one, and you would just click it, and you'll see that your cell or your kind of jumps down, and all this open space opens up. That was what was sort of within the plus sign. You know, if you're not aware of Excel and how it works, you might not know what that is. That's what it was doing. It was basically hiding the rows. And when you work yourself back up here, you'll see that there pops up your instruction. Remember, just like the income, where it says to input your first receipt here. So you can go right ahead. Maybe you have $90 here, and then once you're done that, another one pops up, and maybe it's 85, and so on and so forth. 95, 115, and you just keep walking through that. Okay. And again, just like above, if you had more items, you just keep going down the road. Just to show you, it goes quite some way. Okay. Let's continue with the details method, and let's say that you have some expenses where HST doesn't apply. So, for example, we mentioned before rent. If you have in a home office, you wouldn't pay HST on rent. So in that case, you could scroll down. Okay. Alternatively, if you wanted to make it a little easier, you could just press this minus now, and you'll see that it'll just sort of collapse. And you could scroll down here, and let's pick rent. Okay. And again, we're going to press this plus sign and scroll back to the top and just input your first rent here. Now, you might know your total for the year, but let's just say you wanted to do it individually. So it's 1,400, and then it's 1,400 again, and you continue on. Okay. And you'll see there's no HST, it's just the expense. Okay. A few quick notes. If it so happens that you have both totals and details, so there's a solution for that. So what I mean by that is that maybe for some expenses you know what the totals are, maybe for some you only know the details. So what I would do is I would use this method. I would continue to use this method, and let me just scroll this back up. In any instance where you know the total, so we already have the heat down. Let's assume that's for heat for the year. If you know for your, let's say, insurance, let's say you got an insurance statement and you know what the total is, and the total is, let's say, $1,100 for the year, you could just right here type in $1,100, and that's it. You don't have to type in any more, and that just takes the total. Remember to keep in mind whether it has HST or not. Depending on whether it does or not, you would put it in one of the two sections. Okay. Also, you'll notice just so it doesn't. Also, you'll notice that it just continues on along here. Sorry, I just got a little lost in my presentation here, but that's pretty much how you would use all of that. And just make sure that you type where it tells you to type in. Anytime you don't see the shaded cells or the instructions, avoid putting it anywhere else, because you'll lose the power of how it would work. Okay, so that's how you would enter expenses in using both methods. So that in this case we use the totals, in this case we use the details, and that's sort of it. We're not going to go through this. The expenses auto, because you'd either pick one method and we've kind of walked through it. Okay. And that's really it, guys. That's how you would use this. The purpose of this video is to serve and provide value. So if you have any questions, definitely email me and I would be glad to help.